You're tuned in to the Bleav in Arizona podcast. Hello, Bear Down Believers, and welcome into the show. I'm your host, Matt Reynoldsson, and happy game week. Finally, Arizona football season is here, and we've got a lot to talk about, from the depth chart to potential former Wildcats showing out in the pros and potentially making 53-man NFL rosters when those cut downs are announced on Tuesday. Before we get to all of our content on today's show, I want to remind you to please like and subscribe to the show over on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. Just press the play button on each one of those shows. That helps me out. That's BLEAV in Arizona. And all the video versions of this podcast will be on my YouTube page at Matt_Reynoldsson. My guest today later in the show is Anthony Armstrong of the Bleav in Commanders podcast, here to talk about Michael Wiley, the former Wildcat running back, who's really pushing to make that 53-man roster for the Commanders as an undrafted free agent. Scored 2 touchdowns in the preseason, so we'll talk to Anthony about Michael Wiley's chances. But the headliner today, depth chart. The depth chart is out. It's game week. We now know the results of fall camp and who showed up and showed out over the pack and who earned those starting spots, at least for week 1. This is a fluid situation. So running through the entire roster, here we go. Your starting quarterback, no surprise, that's Noah Fifita, returning stud quarterback. I mean, he is a guy that has held the starting quarterback position all offseason and came into this camp like he was a true seasoned veteran. But in reality, this spring camp and this fall camp were the first 2 that he's ever gone through at Arizona as the starting quarterback. If you remember last year, how could you forget? Jaden DeLaura was the starter for Arizona for the first 4 games until a sprained ankle forced Noah into the game at Stanford, and the Wildcats may not win that game or go on that incredible winning streak without Fifita going in there. So he earned his spot at the top of this depth chart before the offseason even started. But boy, has he delivered on every expectation so far in camp. Noah Fifita, your number 1 quarterback. Cole Tannenbaum, the walk-on out of California, your number 2 quarterback. So the 2 QBs we told you are emerging all throughout fall camp are now the number 1 and number 2. Braden Dorman will be behind Tannenbaum, and then Anthony Garcia, Adam DeMonte, other guys in that room, including Mason Bray, will be bringing up the rear of that quarterback room. Good practice squad guys and guys that could, be called upon to win some games if Arizona needs it. The running back room is fun and interesting, and basically where we told you it was all fall camp. 4 oars. That means 4 co-starters listed on the depth chart at the running back position. That's Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt, Quali Conley, Kendrick Riscano, and Rayshon Speedy Luke. That's 4 great running backs to have in the backfield. And I think the best part of this, and knowing that there are no starters for Arizona in this running back room, or no clear number 1 starters, is that they all do some different things. I think Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt is your most complete back. We'll call him Bill throughout the season. That's his nickname. Croskey-Merritt is a guy who can do it all, catch the ball out of the backfield, but is also a hard between the tackles runner. Riscano, also a guy that can run between the tackles. Conley and Luke, guys that can get out of the backfield and catch the ball and be a weapon in this offense. So 4 starting running backs, that's exactly what you were hoping for Arizona at that running back position. Wide receiver reflects pretty much what we told you all camp. Tedero McMillan, the first team All-American, is your top wide receiver on the depth chart. Devin Hyatt will be behind him. At the Z wide receiver spot, it'll be Montana Lamonius Craig, returning to his starting spot for a second straight year. The sophomore Malachi Riley, who sat out most of camp with some lingering injuries, looks to be ready to go for this week, so he'll be the backup wide receiver at the Z position. And your starting slot, wearing the same number as the starting slot from last year, number 2 Jacob Cowing turns into number 2 Jeremiah Patterson, the JUCO transfer from the College of San Mateo in the Bay Area. He has exploded throughout camp, and he's been a big part of this offense so far. We'll see if he continues to be a big part of this offense. Old Dominion transfer Raymelo Murphy will be in the rotation right behind Patterson. Arizona goes 6 or 7 or 8 deep in this wide receiver room. Obviously, Hyatt, the backup behind T-Mac, but also, you've got guys like A.J. Jones. You've got guys like Chris Hunter. You've got guys like Rex Haynes that can be in this wide receiver rotation. So Arizona goes very, very deep. there. They also go deep at tight end. Your number one, a clear number one, Kean Burnett in that room. But look who's number two, number 84, Sam Olsen, the redshirt junior. He's had some good hands throughout camp. Roberto Miranda is your number three. He has shown a ton as a blocker, but has shown more this camp in the passing and receiving game than we've seen from him in a long time. So Arizona, a strong 3 deep, maybe 4 deep when you put Tyler Powell in there. I mean, you've got guys in that tight end room that can play a factor and can play a role within this team. Offensive line, pretty much what we've been expecting all throughout fall camp. The starters are back. The starters are ready to go, maybe with the exception of Bleav Magnuson. He's listed as an or as a starter at right guard with transfer Ryan Stewart. But from left to right, here we go. Left tackle, Rhino Tapa'atotai, the redshirt freshman. Left guard, Wendell Moe, the returning all Pac-12 offensive guard, Whoa, as they call him. The super senior center, Josh Baker, returns. He'll be the starter on Saturday ahead of Grayson Stovall, who had a nice camp, filling in for Baker as he was down with injury most of the time. I expect Ryan Stewart, the transfer, to take most of the snaps and be the starter at right guard. Always nice to have a swing guard in behind there, though, and Bleav Magnuson, we have seen what he's capable of at that guard position. And your right tackle, the best offensive lineman in the program right now, Jonah Savanaya, will be the starter there, the junior, and a guy who could be a potential future first-round NFL draft pick. So that's your Wildcats offense. No surprises there. Now we go to the defense. This is going to be a bit longer segment than we had with the offense because I've got a lot of takes here on the depth chart on the defensive side of the ball and a lot of good things for this Arizona defense that could play as many as maybe 20, 25 guys in consistent rotation throughout the year, especially on the back end. All right, your starting defensive lineman will start on that strong side of the defensive line, and Taitai Uyangalele has really emerged throughout camp. He's been a guy that played a lot of snaps last year, but really has really emerged as one of the top defensive linemen in this program. He gets the co-starter role at defensive end, along with Sterling Lane. Lane saw some time inside and outside linebacker position, but he settles at that DN spot. Sterling Lane II will be another co-starter on the defensive line. In the interior of the defensive line, we've got a really fun trio right here, all listed as co-starters. Starts with the USC transfer, Stanley Taufau. Stanley has had a good camp, but had quiet parts, and so this is really nice to see him emerge into a starting role because, he was a summer transfer. Took some time to really adjust to the Arizona program, adjust to this attacking style of defensive line that D-line coach Jose Umalo wanted to put in there. So him being listed as a co-starter at the start, transferring in from a school like USC, I know they didn't have the best defense, but they had some athletes there. Big Stanley as a starter is a really, really good sign for this Arizona defensive line. He's a co-starter with Kevon Darton, the transfer from Syracuse, and Jarrett Anderson, the transfer from Memphis. So all three of those transfers coming in and being an immediate co-starters in this defensive line room is hugely, hugely important for Arizona as they look to bottle up the front of their defensive line and stop the run in a run-heavy league in the Big 12 Conference. Your starter at the other defensive line spot, another good sign for Arizona. He was one of my top 10 risers of fall camp, Isaiah Johnson. Had a really, really strong camp and has proven to himself to be one of the best guys in the defensive interior, one of those guys that really takes ownership of Seumalo's attacking mindset in the defensive line room. And the fact that he's a starter over Chuba Maye, the transfer from UC Davis and the heaviest guy on this defensive line roster, look, Chuba will play a whole bunch. So Isaiah Johnson starting here, great sign for Arizona, great sign for the depth in this defensive line room, and a credit to how Coach Seumalo has developed these guys all the way throughout fall camp and going back to summer conditioning in the spring. Now they need to put it on the field. And the other defensive lineman, he's probably going to be a captain. He's probably the best defensive lineman in this program. The All-Mountain West transfer, San Jose State transfer, Trey Smith. He has had that spot on lock all camp long. He's been so impressive. Dominic Lolesio and Cyrus Durham right behind him there. But Trey Smith is your anchor of the defensive line at that D end spot. Jacob Manu will wear the green dot. Head coach Brent Brennan confirmed today that Manu will likely be the one wearing the communication helmet for the defense. So it's no surprise that the returning first team all Pac-12 linebacker will have that honor bestowed upon him and will call the communication signals for the defense from the sideline. He is a guy that will likely put together another all-conference, maybe even an all-America campaign this year. Such a star in the middle of that defense, so steady, so consistent, and he's right there. Tay Brown, who started camp as the starting off-ball inside linebacker, he keeps his starting job. So Kamuela Kaiahue is right behind Jacob Manu. Jared Small is the backup to Tay Brown at the will linebacker spot. And Kaiahue has an or designation with Justin Flo. I wouldn't read too much into that if you're a depth chart reader. Justin Flo is going to have some packages for third down pass rush. In this defense, in this 4-2-5 defense, they don't have a true outside linebacker spot that is designated for, that pass rush DN. Some programs do. This program does not, so he will be a pass rushing specialist outside linebacker. But on this depth chart, he's listed as a code number 2 with Kamuela Kaiahue at the inside linebacker spot. Here's where things get really fun. It's the defensive backfield, and it's because Marquise Groves-Killebrew has emerged as a starting corner for the Arizona Wildcats. What a huge win for Arizona, finally getting the most out of this ballyhooed recruit. Former Texas A&M star stud brought him in. He transferred to Louisville, didn't work out at either A&M or Louisville. It appears to be working out at Arizona. I mean, he looks like a physical specimen in practice. And considering how loaded Arizona's defensive backroom is, they really had one major departure in Ephesians Prysock, who transferred to Washington, who's a co-starter there as well. Looks like they upgraded with Groves-Killebrew, especially if he lives up to some of that freaky athletic potential. He is your starter at corner opposite Takario Davis. Davis obviously looks to be a potential first-round draft pick at that spot. But I like the depth at corner too. Meech Freeney and Javion Celestine right behind Groves-Killebrew. Emmanuel Carnley right behind Takario Davis. And those guys can move around a lot. And look who I didn't even mention. The guy who played maybe the most cornerback snaps in fall camp outside of those two, in Trayden Stukes. Trayden Stukes is back at the star position. So you go too deep at the star position, at that nickel cover position, the guy who can cover tight ends, the guy who can cover the slot, come down and run support, be an absolute chess piece in this Dwayne Aquina defense. You have Trayden Stukes and Genesis Smith, two of the freakiest athletes on this team, two guys that have a real nose for the football and know how to play well. I mean, this is a massive, massive benefit to the star position to have Trayden Stukes back there. It takes much more of the pressure off of Genesis Smith. And so you have depth now at that star position, and you have depth at corner. So does the depth extend to safety? Yes, it does. Gunnar Maldonado and Dalton Johnson, no surprise, are your safeties there, your starters. But the ones behind them are really interesting as well. You have Owen Goss, who had a great, great fall camp. The transfer from Colgate was exceptional all the way through. Played a real impact in the dollar package. Good coming down and run support. Really good in coverage, just a sound football player. And Jack Luttrell, the Tennessee transfer, really came on late in camp as well. Spent part of camp wearing that red no-contact jersey in practice. But Jack Luttrell, just a redshirt freshman, but he looks to be a guy that can come in and make an impact, transferring from a program like Tennessee and that incredible defense. Specialists, they're also interesting. No surprise, Tyler Loop is your starting kicker, one of the most accurate kickers in NCAA history. Will look to continue to tack on to his records this year and cement himself as Arizona's best kicker in program history. But your punter is a true freshman, Michael Salgado Medina, who special teams coordinator Danny Gonzalez told us was one of those impact players in the middle of fall camp. Well, he's your starting punter. And here's the kicker, no pun intended. He's the backup kicker as well. So this guy, a dual threat in the special teams game. He was listed as a quote-unquote 5-star, so a 5-star by Cole's Kicking after coming out of Mission Viejo, California. And this true freshman is now your starting punter and the only guy in that battery of long snapper, kicker, and punter that is a true freshman and looks to potentially be the future specialist in this program. He's listed as Loop's backup, so I find that really interesting because Salgado Medina can kick just as well as he can punt, and if he's emerged at both of those spots, he could be a massive, massive weapon for Arizona for the next 4 years to come. That would be huge. And this guy can punt. So we'll see if he lives up to the billing. Obviously, it doesn't matter until the lights turn on, but Michael Salgado Medina certainly rising as a true freshman in fall camp. He'll be your starting punter and your starting holder and your backup kicker as Tyler Loop has that starting spot. Return is really interesting and really fun. Jeremiah Patterson, the wide receiver, Rayshawn Luke, the running back, your two kickoff return men. I love Speedy Luke back there. I love Patterson just as much. Arizona's going to have some real weapons in the return game, so that should be a lot of fun. The punt return is an interesting situation because this is also a co-starter situation, but look who is the first starter listed. It's Jack Luttrell, the safety transfer from Tennessee. So he could be returning punts, but I expect him to eventually give way to Jeremiah Patterson in that role as well. Arizona, the depth chart is out. It is game week. We are 5 days away from kickoff Saturday night, 7:30 against New Mexico over at Arizona Stadium or on ESPN. Certainly excited for that. We'll have more game coverage as the week rolls along. Well, taking a look at Wildcats outside of the realm of Tucson, 4 Arizona players had a chance to make 53-man NFL rosters. The Wildcats had 3 draft picks in Jordan Morgan, Tanner McLaughlin, and Jacob Cowing. Michael Wiley, the running back, was buried in a very deep running back class, so signed on with the Commanders as a free agent, an undrafted free agent, and he had a really good preseason. So I got a chance to talk to Bleav in Commanders podcast host Anthony Armstrong about Michael Wiley's chances to make the 53. Here's that interview. And as we turn our attention to Wildcats in the NFL, I want to welcome in Anthony Armstrong of the Bleav in Commanders podcast, where Arizona grad Michael Wiley is an undrafted free agent, just coming off scoring 2 touchdowns in the preseason over 3 games for the Washington Commanders. So, Anthony, what did you see from Michael in Sunday's win over the Patriots to close out the preseason as he tries to push his way into that running back room?
Man, you start to see production, right? You get to see coaches want to see if this type of success is going to carry over game from game and practice to games and things of that nature. And he's been able to continually have success. You said 2 touchdowns, 26 yards rushing. It doesn't sound like a lot, but you don't get that many reps in the preseason. And when you get in the end zone, that is always a plus when you're in this league. I mean, he's making a case for himself, and that's all you can do when you're kind of pushed at the bottom of a roster. You're a pretty deep roster. Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler, you obviously know those 1 and 2, and then there's a few other guys in there, Chris Rodriguez. So when you look at the rest of the roster, you just don't know where he's going to fit in at, but he's making a hell of a case for himself.
Well, and Wiley could be one of those guys that could be a practice squad candidate, did come into Washington as an undrafted free agent to a crowded running back room. But from your vantage point, has he been someone that has made an impact or made an impression from his versatility throughout training camp for the Commanders?
It was a name that just kept popping up, and I can say I'm based in the Dallas area, so I'm in McKinney, and so I'm following up on social media and just reading up, and when you start to see names continually pop up, now that's somebody that you're looking for, and that's because they're asking these questions of Dan Quinn, and they're asking the questions of the offensive and the defensive coordinators, and what guys are doing good or doing well, I should say. And when you see things that happen in practice and you start to see how reps get to changing, you get excited for those guys. And Michael's been making some splash plays. He's been flashing a little bit. And I mean, he's going to be in a conversation where somebody's going to be up there standing on the table for him. But if they think he can make an impact on special teams, like is he going to come in that role? Because that's really where it's going to have to be. It's not going to be, hey, you're going to get 10 carries a game. Like it's going to be you're going to get gunner reps, you're going to get punt coverage, all of those things. So if he's made enough noise there, you can really garner yourself a spot on the 53.
Before we delve back into Michael Wiley's roster candidacy, I want to talk about this Commanders offense as a whole, because it's an entirely new look this year under head coach Dan Quinn, because there's a new quarterback. one who played up in the Valley at ASU in Jaden Daniels before obviously transferring to LSU and winning the Heisman this past year, and somebody else that Arizona fans and Cardinals fans know very well. Former Cardinals head coach Cliff Kingsbury is now the offensive coordinator for the Commanders. So with this rookie quarterback and with kind of a wealth of weapons on offense, how do you see Cliff start to find the balance within this offense to take some of that pressure off a rookie quarterback?
Being able to give him easy read at the snap, right? When you line up and you're in 3-by-1. I was watching or listening to some Matt Sims and Phil Sims. They have a great podcast. And I'll actually be checking in with Matt, but being able to give him reads where he can say, okay, if I have single coverage and I got one-on-one on the backside, there's an easy read right there. Giving him chances to get the ball out of his hands quickly, playing with the rhythm and everything you hear about Jaden Daniels, about how cool, how calm that he is. It's all really showing up. It's really showing up in games, and he's handling things really well. So I think you're going to see quick maturation from him. And as much as he grows, is going to be as far as this offense goes. And it could be dangerous. It really could, but you're going to temper our expectations for now because, hey, he hadn't even thrown an NFL pass yet in the regular season.
Anthony Armstrong is my guest from the Bleav in Commanders podcast. And Anthony, as college football fans, we may have a different view of NFL roster cutdown day. But in the NFL, it's a business. And 4 former Arizona Wildcats are rookies in the pros this year. A couple of them look to be roster locks, but of course, there are no guarantees in the NFL. So what can you say about roster cutdown day overall and how, even though it's a wrench of emotions either way, it's not the end of the story for some of these guys that are on that roster bubble?
Man, that is a great question. And it's something that is definitely overlooked and people don't really think much about whenever you see cut day. You just imagine, hey, were they productive on the field or not? And then you got to go. But it gets deeper than that because when you're working your way down, number one, you're working with these guys all summer. Right? I'm grinding together. We're like brothers, but we're all fighting for just a few spots. I mean, the receiver position, you're fighting for about 5 spots, right? Running back room, maybe 3, 4 max. So regardless, it may be 9 or 10 of y'all all summer long. And 2 are locked up. So it's really 2 spots that you're fighting for. Like that gets tough, but it pushes you to another level. You have to up your game, but as you work your way down, it does get pretty emotional. The whole team is more somber on cut days. Especially that last one. There's sometimes just some surprises, some things that people didn't expect. Some tears and things of that nature. So that's definitely a rough day, but you have to pick yourself back up. You have to get going. Because you do have an opponent that's ready to come in there and play some ball against you. So when you get past that, it's pretty tough. But I will say this, if you find your way onto a practice squad, you are there for a reason. Now, some people may be a little bit longer term development, but you're there for a reason because if somebody gets hurt, if somebody is sick, they may need to call you up. And you're just literally 1 play away, 1 or 2 plays away from actually being on that active 53. And don't underestimate the opportunity to work against the best people that are on your team, right? Practice squad, I would go against D'Angelo Hall every single day in practice. You're going to get better from going against the best people that are at your position. So, or that is opposite your position. So it's a great opportunity to develop as a player. And then you're not far away from actually being in a game.
Now, you mentioned special teams a little bit earlier. It's hard for a lot of guys coming out of college because they're used to being that top player on their high school team, that top player on their college team within their position group. So maybe a lot of guys haven't been as exposed to special teams before, especially if they were the star coming in and really just got to show out in their own position group during their high school and college fall camps. So what can you tell people about what it's like to, graduate towards being a special teams role player and knowing that anything that you do will be your best chance to get on the roster when it comes to special teams?
Man, it's really a weird mix of that you still need to be ready to play your position. You can't just put that to the side. There are very few guys that are so elite at special teams like Matthew Slater. He's just one of the top goats when you talk about special teams in this league. So he maybe he doesn't do wide receiver drills all day, but he's gonna really knock it out on special teams. That's where your impact comes from. right? They just want to see, are you going to be a football player? Like a lot of those things translate. It's more than just taking handoffs. And hey, if you're on the field, that's an opportunity to showcase something. Because you have to humble yourself. You have to humble yourself because you mentioned you're a star in high school, you're a star in college. You were projected first round pick. I was projected this, I was projected. The rivals had me as a 3-star, 5-star. You know, everybody has those stories, but you got to still show up and do it. So, yeah, it's oh man, it's interesting.
When you look at a guy like Michael Wiley, his story is an inspiration to a lot of people. The injuries he went through, the multiple coaching staff changes, going through COVID, which a lot of college guys did, and stayed in college for a lot longer than maybe some of your standard early draft entries or guys that have been in college for 3 years and then jumped to the pros. These guys have grinded it out through college camps, through those long summers, through winter conditioning, and now they're fighting for their shot at a pro career that they always dreamed of. For a guy like Michael Wiley, whether he makes the roster or not, but if he gets a shot in the NFL, how much is that emblematic of the inspirational stories that you see from these guys that come from all of these hardships and, all the grind through college to make a roster like this?
Man, it is something that people can relate to, because I mean, there's only so many that are just those top dog elites where you're just like, this guy's gonna leave early and he can go first round, and like very special players. Most folks have to go through some adversity to get there. And I mean, when I look at my path to the NFL, like I worked my way up back leagues. Like I went in D2 undrafted, and then went intense football league, arena league, and then practice squad. So I went the back way. Sometimes having those tough moments, more adversity, it builds more of your character. Like Michael Wiley would probably develop so much more as a player if he's on practice squad, because I'm sure he's bringing it every single day in practice. He's going up against Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu. I mean, like you're not gonna go in there slipping on pass pro when they put the pads on week 1 and they need you to be stepping in there to get a real look on blitz. You're gonna get better, right? So if that's his story, then he's primed for tremendous growth on practice squad, and then he could look to make an impact later on. And another thing about practice squad, I just thought about this. You're one phone call away from being on somebody else's active roster. So another team could call and say, hey, we're going to claim this kid. So Washington has to either activate you or they have to, let you go. And then you have to go to the active roster. So being on practice squad is not that bad. It's a great time to get better. You get all the opportunity to improve.
Yep, you know it as well as anybody. Anthony Armstrong of the Bleav in Commanders podcast, talking with me here on the Bleav in Arizona podcast about former Arizona running back Michael Wiley's chances to make the Commanders 53-man roster, or potentially that practice squad, another practice squad, or another roster after cutdown day. The NFL roster cuts down to 53 men per team at 4 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. That's 1 p.m. Arizona time. Anthony, thanks so much for the time.
Yeah, no problem.
Great stuff from Anthony there. He's on the Bleav in Commanders podcast if you want to check that out on Bleav.com. All right, time to close the show as we always do with the Bear Down Rundown, telling you what else is going on in Arizona athletics. And the Wildcat volleyball team begins play this Friday at home in the Cactus Classic. 3 opponents will be coming into Tucson for a 4-team tournament: Boise State, VCU, and Tennessee State. Those 3 matches consecutive Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all 3 matches over at McHale. Now, the Wildcats did get a win to open the exhibition season this past Saturday on the road, traveling to Greeley, Colorado, and taking down Northern Colorado 3-1. So definitely good to get, not a sweep, but definitely good to get a 4-set win out there at Northern Colorado. Get your travel legs underneath you a little bit, get some camaraderie with the team before coming home for a major opportunity against 3 mid-major programs. Arizona's got to get off to a strong start this non-conference season. It has a manageable non-conference schedule. They can get momentum rolling before it gets into the grind of Big 12 play. And it's not easy. They're starting Big 12 play at Baylor, so that's obviously always a tough opponent. Good opponents all the way throughout the Big 12. BYU comes to mind. There have been other good teams throughout this conference, but I think Arizona will have a lot bigger chance to be successful in the Big 12 than they were the Pac-12. I've talked in previous podcasts about how I'm bullish on Arizona volleyball under Sharita Stubbs, and it's a fun sport to watch. It's fun to rally around these volleyball programs because these women are incredible athletes. And I think college volleyball is one of the most slept on and exciting sports in really the entire college sports landscape. So go check out Arizona volleyball at McHale this weekend, Friday afternoon, Saturday afternoon, and Sunday afternoon. They're up against Boise State, VCU, and Tennessee State in the Cactus Classic here in Tucson. That'll do it for this edition of the Bleav in Arizona podcast. I'm your host, Matt Reynoldson. Quick reminder to please like and subscribe to the show over on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And the video versions of these will always be up on my YouTube page at Matt_Reynoldson. We'll have plenty more pregame content coming this week, including an opponent preview of the New Mexico Lobos as we count down till game day. 5 days away. We'll see you later this week. Try to contain your excitement and have a good one.